The hologram is a system of peer-to-peer care that allows us to see different dimensions of our struggles. It was invented by an artist called Cassie Thornton in 2020 and is now practiced by people all around the world. We explored multi-species hologramming to find out what help different species needed, because all our struggles are connected.
Squirrel, what is your struggle?
That I don't feel safe in my spaces.
And how does it feel when you're being chased?
Very unpleasant.
Do you live with other members of your species that make you feel safer when you're with them?
No, I don't. Everyone's just out for themselves, to be honest. I don't really find companionship or camaraderie in my community, if that's what you want to call it.
Do you find that all this excessive stress causes you physical, long-term discomfort or illness?
I think it's more of a behavioural consequence, personally, that you notice after a while that when you reach for something and your hand comes into view, that it's shaking just a little bit.
How do you feel with other species in your space?
I don't know them. They're there, obviously, and I see them around, and I might observe them from afar sometimes, but we don't talk or anything.
Do you feel safer when there are lots of tall trees about that you can hide in?
It's incredibly disconcerting to come out of sleep and find that there's one less place to go than there was when you went home the night before. And so having that lack of consistency is jarring.
Do you find that having these reducing spaces where you can go, does this have an effect on you as an individual? Does being out in the cold kind of make you feel more uneasy and unsafe?
Well, that's kind of the thing, is that I spend less time out in the cold because I'm less confident to go out in the first place, because I don't know that if I leave my home that it's not going to be gone by the time that I come back.
When do you feel happiest?
Just when I've finally gotten home after foraging and I know that I don't need to worry about anything. Mainly if I know that I'm high enough above everything else to kind of rise above my worries. I wouldn't call it happiness, but I would call it the closest thing I feel to content.
Having our seasons get warmer, so often we see that flowers start to bloom, trees start to bloom much earlier than they did, say, 10, 20 years ago. Do you find that concerning? Does it confuse you?
The difference of when the trees start to sprout their roots and sprout their leaves changes the cover that I have, obviously, because in the warmer times, especially in between spring and the summer, that there's much more leaves and flowers that I can stay away from the preying eyes of those below. But when it becomes more barren, and when it becomes more that it's just a tightrope visible to all, then it's much more obvious, and I tend to get a lot more eyes, which is not pleasant.
You spoke earlier about feeling more at ease when you'd finished foraging for the day. I want to link that to a point you made earlier about worrying about whether or not your home was going to be there when you got back at the end of the day. So the reduced amount of time you spend going out, have you found that affects your eating habits and how much you have to eat?
Well, this is really the problem with having a home that produces what you eat, is that the less places there are for me to get to live, conversely there is also the less places I have to get food from. So overall I found that I'm having to store more often and that I'm having to hoard more at a time than I might have done when my ancestors were there.
What would you say your most common mood is?
Skittish.
Do you find you're experiencing more competition with members of your own species over these limited resources, and how does that make you feel?
We've always been a very competitive kind. We've always come at odds with each other, so I think that isn't anything new, but the added pressure of not just having to compete for, like a mate is kind of added on by the added need to compete just for food and for shelter.
What do you dream about for your future?
I just wish that there were less things around that felt like they were going to step on me, to be honest. It feels like everything that you look at, everything that looks at me, is just kind of intimidating, and it feels like it's going to hurt me. I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know anything about that, but it's just, I hope that there's a time in the future when my children can just spread themselves across fieldland and not have to worry as much about something stalking them in the distance that they can't protect themselves from.
So this hope for the future that you speak of, where there's less prying eyes, is that due to the size of the things watching you, the sheer number of things watching you, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's due to the unreadable intentions of those things. So you've got something that is about, I'd say about 100 times your size, most likely, that's just slowly walking towards you. It's just got its hands in like its pocket, and it's just walking towards you. There's no obvious intention there. There's no offering of any kind. It is purely just there, coming towards you. Tell me that wouldn't send a shiver down your spine.
How would you interpret a positive interaction? So, for example, you mentioned those creatures walking towards you with their hands in their pockets. What would you interpret as a positive outreach versus a negative outreach?
I have seen some that have tried to be a bit better, but it's more just on the less common side, where they will have an offering of some kind in their hand. I don't know, maybe it's a nut or something, and they just put it out and then take some space, and of course I've got nothing to fear from a bit of food, and then I know that human is at least trying to do something to kind of build that relationship rather than just ominously walking towards you.
So what changes do you reckon that they could make in order to make you feel less threatened and more welcome in your own home?
Well, for starters, there could be less of them that are trying to take down my homes and food sources. That's pretty obvious. I think generally being more understanding of our place in the ecosystem and how we are, rather than thinking, oh, it's just a small thing, I'm going to walk towards it because I want to hold it or whatever. And actually being like, this is a thing that has its own personality and that has its own needs and wants its own food, so I'm going to adapt my behaviour to deal with them.
What things do you enjoy doing?
Honestly, there's not a lot for me to be happy about these days.
In a world where you could do anything that you wanted without fear of anxiety, what then would you do?
I'd travel, try a different type of nut, without the pressure of, if you don't do that, you're probably going to starve and die. You want to go to another forest as like a little holiday and be like, that's nice. I'll have some of that. Let's go to a different forest. Rather than the threat of having my home ripped away if I leave in the night.
With some of your species, their home obviously is in the countryside and it's adjacent to things like farmland, where some people consider that you are a danger to their crops and certain methods are used to control your population. How does that sit with you?
I want to answer that question with a question, which is, who was there first? Was it the creatures that live in the things that have been there for thousands of years? Or is it the 60-year-old man?
To kind of build on that point, what do you determine as kind of hallowed ground, if you will, like places that you cannot go for one reason or another? Like what kind of spaces are completely off limits for you?
Can you expand on that just in the sense of, do you mean places that I'm afraid to go, or do you mean places that I feel it's just not my place to be?
One example that I've observed with the humans in particular, if they have space that they don't want any of their kind going into, they'll put barriers around it, or they'll tell other members of their kind, you can't go to this place for this reason. For lack of better wording, what spaces do you interpret as being fenced off from you?
It sounds very basic, but anywhere that's not growing with trees. You kind of feel like a tree is like a checkpoint in that way. That if you find yourself a little bit out of your element and out of your usual zone of comfort, then seeing a tree, even if it's in the middle of a concrete jungle, it's kind of a beacon, and so you know that you've got a safe spot there, especially because it's much less likely that they'll want to get rid of it because it's probably there because it looks nice to them.
What activities make you stressed?
Foraging, trying to find food, trying to find a home, trying to find a mate, trying to interact with others of my kind, trying to get from place to place. There's not many things that I don't find quite stressful, to be perfectly honest. I like the fact that it seems kind of oasis-like, and that it's surrounded by things that are very uninhabitable, but it looks like a big place for us. So that's a nice gesture. But any positive gesture is a gesture taken nicely, you know. I think that as long as there's a net positive outcome, no reason to kind of look that gift squirrel in the mouth, I suppose.